Well, Joe, just a huge welcome to the Sales Transformation Podcast series. I know that you presented at GST, but it's the first time we've had you on the podcast to talk us through your final dissertation. This particular podcast is titled Master Series, so it's where we invite people who've done a master's to come and talk through their projects. In your case, the master's was completed a few years ago, so we'll get the benefit also of what's happened since. But Joe, just a huge welcome to the Sales Transformation Podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you
Thank
on the
you.
podcast. Yeah.
Thank you.
Joe, before we start, could you just tell us a little bit about your role and what you were doing at the time of the dissertation that you did, and what your current role is now, just so the listeners have a chance to set some sort of context?
Yes, absolutely. So at the time I started my MBA and obviously my final dissertation, I was working for a company called CWT, who are a corporate travel company, a global company, and I was leading their sales team in the UK and Ireland. And we actually started it, I think it was March 2020, wasn't it? When we all remember what happened in March 2020 in terms
2020.
of the pandemic. So yeah, as we embarked on this journey, I embarked on a very difficult work journey of my own, just due to the fact that the services we deliver as an organization are corporate travel. And as you know,
No
travel
trouble.
was not there. No. So it was an extremely difficult time. And a lot of throughout the MBA that I completed, I have to say a lot of the topics were very relevant because it was about leading through change and there was a lot of change. But actually, by the time we got to doing my dissertation, which was on leading through and how to lead effectively across different cultures, by the time I got there, I kind of felt that we'd written and I'd undertaken all the work I could on the pandemic. I wanted to look and push forward of actually, how do I take this as a positive? Because as a result of the pandemic, I did end up leading more than just the UK sales team. I was then looking after the Netherlands and Belgium at the time. So I thought, how can I take this as a positive and use it in my dissertation to actually learn, not just for myself, what other learnings I could take forward to the company I was working for at the time. So that's where I was then, which was, as Phil says, a few years ago. Where I am now is I'm still at a corporate business travel company called Reed Mackay, but I'm actually leading the whole of the European sales team. So actually, for me, the outcome of doing that dissertation has been fantastic because it's helped me get the role doing what I do today, because I now head up and look after all of Europe for sales.
It's amazing, actually. I must admit, sort of catching up with you now, it's just an incredible journey you've been on. I know it seems like a long time, but actually it's not over a long. I suppose since 2020, I guess, when you started the masters, you could say it's been about 5 years or so.
Mhm.
But since your dissertation was handed in April
Mhm.
2022, it's time is, that's not a long time, and it's amazing to see what you've achieved since then. So I'm just going to come back to the title of your assignment. So it's how can I develop my cultural intelligence to lead my sales teams more effectively across different cultures. And I think
Mhm.
this topic is going to be so relevant to so many of the listeners. So, we normally start off this with the question why. Why was this
Mhm.
particular topic of such interest to you? I guess at the time you were leading the UK team, but
Mhm.
I guess emerging into a new role. But why was it so important? What made you think you should spend some
Yes.
months researching it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, as you said, my role had changed during that time because I took on responsibility for other countries. And I think my enlightening moment, although I'd worked in a global company for 27 years and sold in the sales team for that long and dealt with colleagues globally, leading them was very different. And I think my defining moment was having a conversation with a salesperson from the Netherlands who are very famously direct, saying to me, so as my leader, what are you going to do for me? So I'm going on a call to introduce myself. And, I took a step back and I thought, well, actually, yes, this is timely because I'm looking after other countries. But, in terms of my future development and future ambitions to either lead a global sales team or lead a European team, as I'm doing today, I really need to develop my skill sets here. I really need to
Mm.
understand how and what I need to do or adapt differently as I move forward with my ambition to lead a sales team globally, which is still obviously I'm Europe at the moment. So my next step is what can I do globally? But let's first adapt and understand the skill set I need and learnings from obviously previous people that I studied and books that I read during the dissertation. What experiences have they had and what did they do to
Mm.
make sure that they were also equipped to go out there and make sure you can lead the sales team as effectively as you can across
Yeah.
different cultures, which ultimately, of course, when you're in sales, the objective of doing that is because you want them to be successful. You
Yeah,
want
of
to
course.
you want to have success, and your overall objective is, or your overall target is, you have a target to meet. So how can I do that, and what skills do I need?
It's always fascinating for me when there's perhaps one sentence or one question that triggers a train of thought. In this case, it was your Dutch colleague.
Hmm.
It was possibly not just the question, but the manner in which the question
Yes.
was
Yeah.
perhaps asked
Hmm. Yep.
that made you that triggered
Yes.
this investigation. And I can identify very much with that. But it's amazing actually how something as simple as a question could then take you on a 6-month journey of
Yeah.
research. And this really deep
Yeah.
reflection. So you got interested in culture at that point, and wanted to explore the cultural dimensions. Can I just ask, what was it about that question that made you felt you wanted, made you feel this was a cultural issue rather than just a personality issue?
Yeah.
What made you think this is something bigger than just I'm dealing with a very direct person?
Yes, that's. I think that's a fair question, because you always have to have that balance between somebody, how they are personally and their personality versus is it the culture. And I think it's because I'd also had a conversation then with his colleague in the same team, same question, same directness, and I thought, okay,
Oh,
this
okay.
isn't necessarily personality. So it was actually two questions. It was both meetings I
It
had,
was
both
both
one-to-ones
meetings.
that triggered
Okay.
that thought process. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was also, also what triggered it was the fact that I had taken on this extra responsibility. So I did think, okay, is there anything else I need to be doing? I think that really, it
Yeah.
confirmed it and cemented it that yes, this was going to be
Yeah.
the topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really that I'd taken on that additional
Yeah.
responsibility for those countries that I thought I want to
Right.
make sure I can do this. And I also see my ambition in the future of leading a global sales team. So
Yeah.
this is a really worthwhile topic to do now.
Yeah.
And probably the final part is, as we know, COVID made the world more virtual.
Yeah.
And I could also see a world where, people were not traveling to see each other face to face,
Yeah.
which is often how you keep that cultural alignment, because you're meeting people in
Yeah.
person. But when you're leading teams virtually, you
Yeah.
have to your skill set has to be even greater, I think,
Yeah.
because it's even harder.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. I remember sort of speaking to you at the time of the pandemic and recognizing and you just spoke about it at GST as well,
Yes.
just the enormity of the change and also, know, difficult to stay. I know you've been with CWT for many years, hadn't you? And sort of
Hmm.
seeing the organization suffer
Hmm.
as it did during that time
Yes.
um, was was quite extraordinary. But it's amazing how just I think resilience that you showed as you went through that change process in its own right was incredibly impressive to observe. But I think when we come into talking more about the dissertation,
Mhm.
you're able to straddle both the emerging out of the pandemic, as you said earlier, as well as where the opportunities then started, where the business started to build back, and you started to
Yes.
see some
Mhm.
sort of positive, because it's a lot of pent up demand, I think, for
Yes.
travel once the borders were reopening. Do you know, when I read your dissertation, you quote, there's someone you get a
Mhm.
quote. I'm not going to challenge you on the quote, but I'm going to read it out. It was a Birkinshaw quote.
Yes, I know which one you're going to
You know,
say. Yeah,
do you
I
know
do
what?
know which quote. Honestly, I couldn't believe it when I read it, but yes.
I can read it out. I've got it here on the
Oh, have you
screen.
got it? Yeah, yeah.
No one knows when a deadly virus might hit us on a global scale. Unpredictability, therefore, creates challenges of a different nature. And this was the first thing. It was written by, I guess that's Julian Birkinshaw.
It
Is that
is.
it?
Yeah,
Is, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And so that's number one. Well, here's Julian, who I have a huge amount of respect for. I cited him in my doctorate, but not about this topic, about something different.
Yeah,
So it's making me think, blimey, he's writing about this as well.
yeah.
And of course, the uncanny, sort of coincidence that even 3 years after this was written, we now found
Yes.
ourselves in the
Yeah.
situation that he described. But you could have written about unpredictability. You
Mhm.
could have written, but you chose to explore sort of cultural change more, which
Yes.
which is which is fine. But yeah, that obviously in a context sense was quite an important to recognize that you did this when you were coming out of the pandemic more, and now with the added responsibility of the Netherlands and Belgium under your wing. So one of the questions I always love asking people on the Masters series is, as part of your journey, you're asked to do a review of key literature. And
Yes.
I know that there was some particular authors and researchers
Mhm.
that you took quite a lot of value from. I wonder if you can just talk through who for you were some of the key influences, and what you found interesting just through your research process.
Yes, absolutely. I think, I mean, again, obviously, when you look at the topic, and when I decided on the topic of leading across different cultures, there is numerous literature out there. The one I found that I valued the most actually was a book by a lady called Erin Mayer called The Culture Map. And I think why for me that resonated the most was the book that she had written, and that she'd actually basically done a map of the different cultures and what to be aware of and how to build your skill set dependent on the culture, or the country, I should say, that you were leading. She had done all of that really from her own personal experience. And I think that's why it really resonated with me, because, of course, up until then, I'd worked in a global organization. And of course, I dealt with my colleagues globally every day. I just hadn't led them. So I really felt that a lot of what I would be doing, because I've been given Belgium and Netherlands, I would have to learn by experience. But what I liked about Erin Mayer's book was, giving you that upfront view of, well, I've been there, done it, and actually probably made a few mistakes. It meant that I could equip myself with the skills, maybe not to necessarily make some of the same
Mm.
mistakes in terms of dealing with culture and how she did it. And hers wasn't all around leading. Obviously, it wasn't around leading sales team. It wasn't all about leading, but it was very much based on her own personal experience, and she'd lived and worked in other countries as well.
Okay, so she'd lived and worked in other countries,
Yes,
not just managing people who were living in other countries. She
she
had
had.
she had
Yeah.
done that, and
Yes.
she created this map, as you say. And perhaps we can go into the details of the map um,
Yes. Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think one of the one of the reasons why I find the topic so interesting is that up until the age of 18, my home was never in the UK. It was always in another country. So I had sort of lived my life from being, from small islands in the middle of the Atlantic to the Mediterranean area to the Yemen in the Middle East, Trinidad, Sierra Leone, many different countries, and each one of those countries had its own culture,
Mhm.
and one had the sense that, so I'm just talking about personal experience, one had the sense you were always a guest in someone else's country. You recognized how, you recognized both physically and culturally how how different they were. But I think it- it meant that one was less judgmental about different cultures, because you were always appreciating.
Mhm.
Well, certainly this is my sense of the first 18 years, 20 years of my life. My sense was that you sort of appreciated different customs, different cultures, and so one didn't form such strong points of view. But I didn't systematically analyze the difference of culture in Sierra Leone to Yemen to Bahrain. I didn't do that. So what I found really interesting about Mayer's map is the way that there's certain dimensions are being measured and then
Yes.
mapping the nationalities against them.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a bit more about about what in particular, do you want to talk about the map at all, and to give us an idea of what sort of things she developed in the map?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, what she developed was almost she called it the 8 scale model for and mapped the different countries. So she did do it by country, and the 8 topics really were communication, evaluation, persuading, leading, decisions, trusting, disagreeing, and scheduling. And just as an example, then so that would be on the left hand side. On the right hand side, it would be where that country was in terms of their communication, in terms of what you call low context or high context. So as an example, if we go to the left hand side in terms of countries like France and Germany, Netherlands as well, generally you will have the points that are being communicated are the points that they want to get across to you. Where if you go to the right hand side, if you're looking at countries like China and Japan, for example, there will often be due to the culture, a subtext there. So although words will be spoken to you in a meeting, there may also be another other context that sits underneath
Right.
that. So it's about understanding that. And again, I think, as you've done when you were very young, but as we all visit different countries, we all begin to
Yeah.
understand that. But again, it's really making sure that you have that conscious understanding in your head before you go into a meeting. And I always use this example: if you have a global meeting, and again you've got that communication with some countries that will talk to you directly or also be very vocal. Perhaps some countries, the culture is more respectful, and they will only ask a question if you answer a question. Sorry, if you ask them. So it's about making sure you can then have, and I use this, a European versus a Asia Pacific. If you're all on a call together, you could have a
Yeah.
very one-sided meeting with, quite honestly, all of the Europeans having a voice,
Yeah.
and people from the countries in the Asia Pacific may be quieter because in their culture it's about being asked questions and then answering them. So as a leader, you've got to make sure you understand that different levels of communication. I'm not going
Yeah.
to go through all 8 of Erin's because we'll
No,
be here
that's a
for a
really
time. But
that's a really good
the
one.
communication one really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And to make sure as a leader, I would say to, Phil, you haven't given your opinion yet, or this question, perhaps you
Yeah.
could give me your thoughts on that, to make sure people are included, and realize people would not be sat there just because they
Yeah.
are naturally, have no input to the meeting. It's
Yeah.
just how they're used to meetings being run, it may be on a country only basis.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's on communication is really interesting, because I think even when you even within Europe, you have, there's sometimes quite big differences. For example,
Absolutely.
I remember sort of running a workshop in Finland. So Finland's quite different to Sweden and Norway and Denmark, even though some people think it's it's all the same because but Finland sort of running a workshop, and it was really difficult when you throw a question out to a group of people to get any one person to kind of respond. And so I found that they would be very quiet. And so I think they understand what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And the only way of really drawing them out was by asking them, like you said, more direct questions. So I guess that would be a bit like the Japan China example. But what was interesting, in the evening, the group was totally different. In a social environment, it was totally mad. Sitting together in a sauna, and totally different. But and I've heard that, I've heard that similar experience being shared by others who are also dealing with people in Finland. Just the way of communicating is very different. Like you were saying earlier about the Netherlands, different countries have different cultures, and one needs to be kind of sensitive. When you were looking, I mean, you may not have had a chance to process this, but if you're looking at all those 8 dimensions of, I won't go to them all again. Were there any ones where there was more of a convergence, would you say? Where there were much closer connections. And I'm just, for example, looking at the some of the graphs you've shown in your
Mhm.
project, and wondering whether leadership, within the country, leadership, yes, it's very hierarchical in China, Japan,
Mhm.
but when it comes to comparing France and Germany, they're halfway to hierarchical. So the points on the chart maybe is slightly converging, but I mean, maybe it's not possible to say across those 8 dimensions there's some components which are more common across all the cultures than less common.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, well, I definitely think leadership. So yes, where you're
Okay.
saying more hierarchical, but actually one of the things I did find, and when I was do some of the interviews, is that people would naturally probably say hierarchical, yes, to some cultures over the other, and US is they're quite relaxed. It's much more of formal. It's
Yeah.
more of the triangle.
Yeah.
Actually, I found that it is quite hierarchical in the US. So I think even
Okay.
though and that may just be the example of the company I was working for, because it was US headquartered. So they were more similar when you were operating in a corporate company than you think.
Right.
Is what I would say. So they were probably closer together. There's certainly, I didn't find the different cultures and in the countries I interviewed that there was
Yeah.
such a stark difference as maybe some of
Right.
the charts where the differences in the countries you see on Mayer's charts.
But for you, so as you were sort of studying Mayer's model and thinking about your own experiences, then um, could you just talk through where you started to make the connections between the model and your leadership approach?
I think for me, so the two, and I've pulled them out in my dissertation. We've just talked about communication. For me, the leadership approach that I saw, the two key themes were the communication and trust, and
Okay.
that's what I knew. I mean, communication is really a no-brainer, right? When
Yeah. Yeah.
you're leading, but the two things I pulled out that for me I knew I'd have to do in my leadership was really understand how that communication works, and then really understand how virtually I could build trust with teams. So for
Right.
me, they were the 2 points. And
And
Um,
what sort of things did you begin to do in order to try and build trust and get the communication style right?
So in terms of communication, I think it's well, there's a couple of ways in terms of communication. You've either got a big group of people together. So I think
Yeah.
the example that I've given is you just make sure if you've got countries joining in that one country is particularly
Yeah.
vocal, you just make sure you,
Make
as
sure
you
you pull
did,
the others in.
pull
Yeah.
the others in and say, Phil, you tell me about this,
Yeah.
and make sure that you have that all inclusion. I think in one-to-ones, it's, there's that very formal versus informal approach
Yes.
can also work very well. And again, for me, I found being more direct with my colleagues in the Netherlands and saying, like, this is what we're doing today. This is what we're going to talk about up front. Because if I reverse it back, what I used to do when I started as a leader was do all the nice things. If you're having a difficult conversation, or have a chat first, do all you kind of try and build up to it. Very British thing to do, by the way, in your
Sure.
culture.
Yeah.
Talk about it, and then you get on to that. Let's talk about whatever the difficult topic is we're going to discuss. But
Yeah.
I would carry on actually doing that still with the UK team. That was
Yeah.
how I think they preferred that communication. But with the Netherlands team, the Dutch team, I'd say, right, okay, we're talking about this today. Here, and almost I'd send an email out as well saying, here's the points we're going to talk about
Right.
up front, and you'd have
Yeah.
that conversation, and then potentially, obviously, would also have
Yeah.
a chat about day to day and what else has been going on. So
Right.
that was one thing on a one-to-one I quickly adopted with
Okay.
with the communication.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
trust is so intrinsically linked to that,
Yeah.
because again, Mayer's book will call out around the difference between the task-based trust and relationship-based trust. And again,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
differences in terms of how I build those relationships. How do you do that? Is it by doing the niceties, asking how mum, dad, sister is? And
Yeah.
again, some countries, the book, the findings that Mayer brought out is very much, again, some cultures they don't want to do that. Come on, I'm working, tell me what I'm doing, that's fine. As you talk about the sauna in the evening after work, fine,
Yeah.
happy to talk about family,
Yeah.
life, what
Yeah.
you're doing all day long, but very focused at work, and don't really want to
Yeah.
entertain that. So again, that's another you just adapt to that, and you make sure in terms of one-to-ones and leading that
Yeah.
you adapt your leadership style to that person you're talking to.
Yeah. I
And I
remember.
will, just one final thing actually. So I will say, so you do have to blanket this, because there's obviously been a lot of studies across culture. There is always the element of personality. So of course, if someone it wasn't a hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
Any of my colleagues or team members, if that was their personality and they loved to have a chat, and I knew everything, about
Yeah.
their day to day life, that's what we did. I didn't. There's no hard and fast rule.
Yeah. But obviously,
Sorry, I
it was
interrupted you there.
no. I was just going to say, I remember sort of early in my career, I was visiting quite a large organization in Bahrain, I think it was, in the Middle East, and walked into the general manager's office, and I had my briefcase with me, and I was about to get out my notepad and prepare for the meeting. And I remember the general manager said, "No, no, put your briefcase away. Yeah, just put everything away." And he said, "You've got to understand how we work here in the Middle East." He said that if I don't like you, it's all about relationships. He was saying, if I don't like you, if we don't get on, then it doesn't matter what you've got in your shiny briefcase. Basically, it's not
Yeah.
going to work.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we sat down, on the carpet, cross-legged, which I found difficult in its own way because I'm not that bendy a person, drinking coffee and eating a few dates. But it was such a I should have known better, actually, because I had lived in the Middle East for quite a number of years. I should have known that sort of Bedouin culture, that exists, incredibly hospitable
Mhm.
and welcoming. And just say start. But I do remember sort of being called up on my approach. So, but that's what makes it so. I think that's what makes life so interesting, isn't it? The different cultures of working in global businesses, and that's
Yeah.
probably what you love about what you do. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah,
I always, I've been lucky that I started work at a global company from the age of 20. So I was at the company for a very long time.
yeah,
When I started, of course, it was a very country by country. The world wasn't as global, anywhere
yeah,
near as global as we are now. But I'd always been exposed to that. And what I love and still love about the job now, because it's a global company, is you can talk to somebody different every day. You can hear
yeah,
their experiences every day. So
yeah,
it's amazing to have that opportunity
yeah,
to be able to talk to people from different countries and
yeah,
cultures every single day.
yeah,
It's what I love about doing the job.
yeah, yeah. Great. So, okay. So you studied Mayor's model and then you went about your research.
Mhm.
And could you just talk us through a little bit the kind of what you decided to do from a research perspective to try and sort of drive more insights around the topic?
Yeah, so I mean, I quickly obviously identified, given what I needed to do, it was my gap. So it was all about me. So it was action research because I wanted to increase my skill set and gap in knowledge around
Yeah.
how to lead other cultures. So obviously, I had that whole action research methodology approach, and then made sure that I could, really go into all of the reflections that I needed to undertake as
Yes.
an individual. Obviously, I've done all the reading, and then I looked at what those methods would be. And again, it's my skill set that I wanted to increase my gap. I wasn't going out and collecting hard and fast facts. So, for me, it was qualitative versus the quantitative because it
Yes.
wasn't numeric data. So, really, for me, the best way of looking and researching and understanding the topic further was to do the surveys and interviews. So,
Yeah.
I put some surveys together to send out. Again, I was fortunate enough. I'd like to say at the time we were a company of 18,000, but sadly, after COVID, it was a company of 13,000.
Yeah.
However, I had a big pool of people to choose from.
Yes.
So I could send out short surveys to be able to collect that data. But then I also undertook interviews with leadership from around the
Yes.
world. Again, I was in a very lucky position that I was in a global company, so I
Yeah.
could interview. And what I did actually was interview someone from each region. So someone from what we call NORAM, North America, someone from LATAM, someone from APAC, and someone from EMEA, which is
Yeah.
Europe.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was for me and the interviews were actually semi-structured. So I had some questions, but of course, because I knew the individuals, which was probably the most challenging part, because I had to be impartial, but
Yes.
I kept it in a semi-structured fashion to make sure
You
that
covered
I
all.
could
Yeah.
cover all the topics that I wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, were there any surprises at all, or any insights you got in particular from the interviews that you didn't get perhaps from sort of reading Mayer's work?
I think it was that one when with the leader of North America that I actually realised, and I still, even doing further research, I do believe it's not just because I was working for a US headquartered company. It wasn't just the company I was working
Yeah.
for that. Actually, it was much more hierarchical in the US than I had thought, or some of the research
Right.
that I read had come out. There was actually quite a line of, this is the process we expect you to follow. So I think that was the one thing that really stood out for me.
Yeah. So I wonder if you reflect on the current USA president at the moment
Hmm.
and say that perhaps that amplifies the hierarchical approach. But I'm not
Yes.
going to make a political statement. I'm not going to ask you to do that. But
No, that's fine. But I think the comment is a valid comment.
it's
Yeah.
okay. So interesting, isn't it? Okay, so that is surprising because, but I guess if you start to compare America, say to Sweden, which is very consensus based, isn't it? Decision
Mm.
making in Sweden.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, the default is more, as you say, hierarchical or
Yeah.
authoritarian, perhaps a little bit
Yes.
directive rather than consensus driven. And that's maybe not just for leaders. I think people have a can-do attitude.
Mhm.
Perhaps in America, so they tend to self-direct as well. It's not just a leadership phenomena,
No.
which is interesting. You should say that. Okay, so you did a series of interviews, and you did a certain degree of thematic analysis, I think, and
Yes.
from that
Yeah.
you started to identify sort of common themes. I wonder if you can just talk us through what those themes were that you began to uncover. Um,
Yeah, and I've touched on a couple of them, which were the two that resonated the most, which were communication and trust.
and
The
trust.
other two were experience and awareness.
Okay, so could you
Uh,
just talk us through experience and awareness a bit, and what you mean by that?
yes, so experience was again the biggest learning from doing the interviews and the surveys were a couple of the questions were around, how long you've been doing the job, how long have you worked globally. So I quickly understood that, in terms of how much experience someone had may also reflect on how culturally aware they were.
Okay.
And the final one about awareness was it was making sure that, as a leader, you were always aware of when you were going into meetings or even just picking up the phone to somebody, how you actually approached that call. So it was making sure and that was some of that came out in terms of the theming. So I was putting coding the words together. So it was talking about things like body language and the non-verbal cues that you get, and it was having that awareness of them seemed to be a key theme, because what I found, and the experience links to it, is if I think back to when I first started, when I was 27, 28, and maybe would start having calls with people, I would come off calls and think, oh, I don't know what I've done wrong there. Or is,
Yeah.
that person's body language, I don't know quite how to read that, if it was a virtual call or even meeting someone in person. And what I found, obviously, is the more experience someone had working in a global organization, the more, the more culturally aware that they became.
Yeah. So when you were doing the interviews, were you asking the interviewees questions about their appreciation of cultural difference, or
I
the
was, yeah,
challenges that they faced? Was that the
it was
angle?
both, actually. Yeah. So in terms of the seminar, I'd say I'd ask them about both, in fact.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so their experience of their what they had done maybe, and also what, how they had overcome any challenges as well that they'd had.
Yes,
And
because I
some of
think,
that could present itself in conflict, right? Quite
yeah,
honestly, you could have calls where there would be conflict.
yeah. No, I like the way you sort of asked them to come up with examples, I think, of things that they've experienced, I guess,
Hmm.
in their role as leaders that had gone well and perhaps not gone so
Yeah,
well, and
yeah.
use that, extrapolate from that the sort of
Hmm.
um, ideas that you've got. So coming back, sorry, the second 2 points of the thematic analysis
Mm.
were experience. So that
Hmm.
was that the extent to which experience is a big influencer of how well you can communicate with people across different cultures, or was it more to do with the respect? The respect, people respecting you because you've got 20 years experience in the travel industry. So no matter which culture you're working in, you would have, as a leader, sort of earned a certain
The
degree of
respect.
respect.
No, it was actually when I did the themes and the coding, it was pulling out there was a significant number of negative words which were around emotions and feelings around their
Oh,
own experiences. So in
got it.
turn, they then said that had provided them the experience and awareness to be able to lead more effectively. So it was more around when something had not gone well. So I would always say a meeting. if a meeting had not gone well, i.e. we've talked about body language, tone, how they then took that as a learning and it gave them as an individual the experience and awareness. I mean, you could also say there is, of course, with experience and as a leader, naturally, if you've created that trust and had that communication, you'll also have that respect through because you're more experienced. But no, this was
Yes.
definitely around the experience that I'd
That wasn't
had
okay.
that
So,
wasn't
but connected to
necessarily a
negative
positive one.
emotion. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and it was linked to so a lot of the conversations around leading across different cultures. It was linked to emotions and feelings. There was a lot of because if it'd been a bad experience, someone naturally remembered, oh gosh, I remember this meeting when XYZ
Yeah.
happened. And then obviously they'd stood back and had a reflection and thought, oh, maybe I could have done something differently. That didn't go well. And for next time, I've got that awareness going in to what I need to do.
Right.
But of course, all of us had just learned by having the negative experiences. I think that's what the biggest learning as well for me doing the dissertation and the interviews. We'd all learn not by how I wanted to. I know we're going to probably get onto that, but how I wanted to take it forward in the business. We'd learn by going, oh, that was awful, and gosh, have I upset someone, or what have I done? You learn, of course, on the job, but actually what the biggest enlightenment for me doing this is actually not everyone needs to go through this. We can almost equip them, or
Yeah.
can equip them with a framework to say these are the things you need to think about as you go into lead. It's almost, it's really the why also the fantastic MBA in sales leadership exists, because it's the same thing, right? You start leading in sales and you have these awful experiences, and actually you don't need to, because there's a fantastic education that you can do to really equip people. I just, I can't, it should be there for everyone, in my opinion, for sales leaders.
Well, of course, I would agree with that. But you very neatly take us on to the question of the so what of your project, which is you did this research, you had a lot of personal reflection, got thoughts from others, and out of that, you started to recommend more structured frameworks for people to understand how they can manage perhaps more effectively across different cultures. So could you tell me about that part of your experience, and what sort of support did you have for the ideas that you were developing?
So after I'd completed my MBA, I presented it to my global sales leader. So actually, no, two of my leaders. So my European sales leader, who had obviously supported me throughout the whole of the MBA. And my global sales leader, who knew obviously that I was doing it, but he was in the US, so they don't get into the day-to-day. So once I presented it to them, not the whole thing in its entirety, but the overview and my learnings, and the fact that I said, as people come into leadership roles, or even for us today as a leadership team, I think we could build a great framework that could become part of our sales. Obviously, most organizations have what they call a sales playbook. We could have and carve out a section in that to give people the tips, or if they wanted them particular deep dive and mentoring or support on it, I could provide that. And they were absolutely, because it's, for them, there was no particular budget involved. And again, in my dissertation, I do carve and talk about a little bit, could we get the budget in terms of who needs to redo the playbook, which was challenging because we'd had COVID, but it wasn't a great stretch for them to do. It was a no-brainer to say, yeah, absolutely, anything that could benefit our key learnings. And so then in fact I did have calls with the leadership team, so we talked through it. I talked about the Mayo model, so I talked through that. I talked about my findings, and then did, in fact, towards the end, put something. We never made it to the playbook, sadly, because I left the organisation.
You left the organisation
yes.
then.
However, certainly intend to do it in this organisation, in terms of because I'm really in a lucky position here. Good position, lucky.
Yes.
This is a smaller organisation I'm in, and they are just growing globally. So they're almost in the same position that my previous organisation was 10, 15 years ago. where actually, what a great opportunity. So there is no sales playbook. We want to put one in place. We've
Yeah.
got sales enablement. We can do it now. You can make it
Yeah.
part of it now, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Amazing having the opportunity to, start at ground zero in a way, as if nothing has been developed so far,
Yeah.
and sort of pull together all your different experiences. And you said you felt that your dissertation journey actually sort of enabled you to get the job. Is that, did it come up in the interview?
Yes. Yeah.
It did.
Twice, because I had to
Twice.
be interviewed by a lot of people. Actually,
Well,
maybe 3 times. So I was obviously, when you go for a
okay.
leadership role, you're interviewed by
Yeah.
obviously my leader now, who's on the board, then head of HR and the CEO. So yeah, all of them, I cited the fact that, questions
Right.
always, why do you think you're best for the job?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us what you've done. And obviously, aside from my actual on the job experience at the previous company,
Yeah.
I also talked about the fact that I'd gone through this journey in the MBA, and actually my final dissertation was around
Wow.
leading, how to effectively lead across different cultures. So yeah, I do absolutely believe
It's amazing.
it was
Yeah.
a big factor and a contributor
Yeah.
towards getting my role.
Oh, fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. If there are any sort of key takeaways that you would, for the listeners have, based on your experiences of looking into cross-cultural communication, what would the key takeaways be?
So I think in terms of when you're looking at, and it doesn't have to obviously be necessarily leading a sales team, being part of a sales team is
Yeah.
just as important to have that cultural awareness and
Yeah.
how you develop your skill set. It's always to lead with your own gut feeling. And, there's a lot of work I know we do in the masters around emotional intelligence as well. That's a big
Yeah.
contributing factor towards that
Yeah.
cultural awareness. So yeah, I think the two takeaways for me are always, it's that stopping and thinking, that awareness part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But then also always go with, that terms of being culturally aware, always go with how you feel. You don't change your person because of it. It's just having that kind of stop for a moment before you go in to
Yeah.
calls, to meetings, to think, okay, who have I got in the room? And taking that step back. So my two takeaways now are always, I probably used to, with sales, obviously, everything's always a million miles
Yeah.
an hour.
Yeah.
I always take that moment now to sit and look, okay, I'm going into a meeting. What am I doing? I'm going on a call. What do I need to think about differently? Is there anything I need to think about differently
Yes.
before you go in? That's the biggest takeaway
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. And that's reflective practice, isn't it? It's one of the things that we talk about
Yes.
in module
Yeah.
1, and you're probably wondering, what on earth are we talking about reflective practice for? It's always amazing to
Yes.
see students go through the journey and seeing how they begin to look at the world in a slightly different place.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
which is obviously happened with you, but no, I think you've been a great exemplar of someone who's really embraced that particular approach and sort of seen it through what was a very difficult time. We feel we're grateful and amazed at those students who happened to do their dissertations during the pandemic, because they didn't get much chance to even see each other. I think,
No, yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
a lot of
We
it
had
was
the one get
virtual.
together. We had
Yeah,
the one get together. But, on the flip side of that, it was also, I've said many times, it was something positive and something to look forward to. It
yeah,
was
yeah,
an amazing anchor in times of great unknowns.
yeah,
And having to, having to have worked for possibly, I still believe, the most badly affected sector
yeah. It
that
is.
you
Yeah,
could have been, that it
yeah,
couldn't have been a more perfect storm in that respect in terms of,
yes, yeah,
what happened. But it was that anchor and,
yeah,
yeah, just a really good chance as well in it to learn
yeah,
that new skills that you didn't
yeah,
even think you either potentially needed
yeah,
or were possible. You also
yeah,
don't think you're possible of doing it until you embark on the journey either.
yes,
It's it really is, it is such an incredible experience
yeah.
to go through.
Can I ask a slightly sort of curveball question? It's not too difficult, but you talked about remote and remote working. Probably what the pandemic did was sort of triggered people doing much more sort of Zoom related calls and so on.
Mhm.
Do you have any thought? But you also talked about the importance of one-on-one communication,
Mhm.
and meeting people in person rather
Yes.
than meeting people remotely. Are you still a great advocate of that, even though it's still very much a sort of communication is more often than not remote, unless it's different in
Yes,
your
no, it
experience?
is. I mean, that is the challenge with my role. I do visit the countries that I look after in
Yeah,
Europe, but you
yeah,
can't be there all the time.
yeah.
However, you have to have that mix. So
Right.
you have to, I
Yeah,
mean, I stay in touch. So from a one-to-one basis, obviously they happen
yeah,
virtually.
yeah.
It's having them on that regular basis to make
Right.
sure you have those touch points. But
Yeah,
since the organization I'm now at, they are a big advocate of being office based. So I'm
okay.
now in London a lot more, and actually I've really seen how much the differences that you can communicate and connect with people, and also how easy it is to build that
Yeah,
trusting relationship. Because obviously, me coming into a new organization, regardless of culture,
yeah,
I had to build that trust.
yeah,
And I've
yeah,
seen that it is just how you can do it through being in person versus
yeah.
virtually.
You're right.
And we are still seeing in the sales world, unfortunately, we're still doing a lot of virtual meetings for the first or second
Right.
time virtually. But
Okay.
we are still seeing, we always say, let's do it face to face. I
Yeah.
still see that sales, this is why it's so important, selling, if you can get together in person. And this
Yeah.
is why we're still traveling, because with different cultures, you have to be there. You
Yeah.
have to be in there in person, because it is all of that. And again, I think my dissertation talks about it, is all of that nonverbal or that relationship-based communication that might happen outside of the boardroom. That's
Yes.
so important. It is
Yeah.
so important to A, build the team, and then
Yeah.
B, that team need to do that. You're doing it so they feel motivated to go
Uh,
out and also belong to the company and sell for the company.
yeah. 100%. Yeah. With you on that. Great. Well, I think that brings us to the end. Joe, thank you so much for taking
Thank
part.
you.
I hope it wasn't too challenging having to go back 2 or 3 years to
No,
your research.
I really enjoyed rereading my dissertation, actually, thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote all of that.
That's right.
So
When you,
yeah, I actually felt a little bit proud of myself
yeah,
that
you
I've done
should.
it. You
Yeah.
do when you look back, because at the time it feels like, oh my gosh, I'm
Yeah.
still writing, reading, researching,
Yes.
and yeah, it's a real nice sense of achievement when you
Yeah.
reread it, actually.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much.